Howdy folks, and welcome back to War Thunder with the mighty Jingles. Today we're taking a look at a simulator battle, so serious propeller heads only. This is Nachladen, or possibly it's Nachladen. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, it's something German. He's flying the Me-410. Well, he's flying one of the Me-410s. This is one of the night fighter variants, which you can tell by the radar array mounted on the nose. Now, this is of course a simulator battle, so if you're expecting fast and furious arcade dogfighting gameplay, you are going to be severely disappointed. That's just not what simulator battles are like. Apart from anything else, the Me-410 is a heavy fighter, or to give it its German designation of Zerstörer, it's a destroyer. These things were not about the dogfighting. You can dogfight with them in arcade battles, but not in realistic, and definitely not in simulator. Everything works as intended in simulator battles, and that's as it should be, because dogfighting with Spitfires, Yak-3s and LA-7s is not what the Me-410 was for. It was a heavy fighter, it was supposed to go after large targets, bombers. It was quite effective in the ground support role, and that was largely down to the astonishing array of weapons that were capable of being fitted to this thing. Over 140 different weapon configurations, using practically every air-to-air weapon and air-to-ground weapon available in the Luftwaffes arsenal. It had a very modular weapons bay, which allowed a huge array of weapons to be swapped and fitted to this very versatile, if not very successful, aircraft. And it wasn't very successful for the same reason that the Bf-110 wasn't very successful. The whole heavy fighter concept was seriously flawed. During the Battle of Britain, the Bf-110 was initially assigned as an escort to the Luftwaffe medium bombers like the Dorniers, the Junkers and the Heinkels. Unfortunately for the Bf-110 crews, it turned out that they were so woefully outclassed by the Hurricanes and Spitfires that they actually needed escorts of their own. Clearly this situation couldn't last, and so the Bf-110, quite early on during the course of the Battle of Britain, was withdrawn from its primary role as a bomber escort and assigned other duties. The Luftwaffe was still determined to press ahead with the whole heavy fighter concept, however, and so production was green-lighted on a successor to the Bf-110, known as the Me-210. And it looked very, very similar to the Me-410 that we can see here, and it looked very similar to it for some very, very good reasons. Essentially, the Me-210 was a development of the Bf-110. It used many of the same components, but it was an utter disaster. It was a terrible aircraft. Very, very unstable. It killed numerous test pilots and garnered a terrible reputation within the Luftwaffe. Interestingly, although the Me-210 was never considered fit for service and never entered production, the Hungarian Air Force managed to fix some of the problems associated with it and produced a version of the Me-210, the Me-210C, that would actually have been airworthy. As the Luftwaffe engineers continued work on development of the Me-210D, the decision was made that the aircraft had such a bad name with the pilots that it would be better to actually rename it completely. Thus, the Me-410 was born. Improvements over the Me-210 incorporated into the Me-410 included, but were not limited, to two much more powerful and much bigger engines, generating a hell of a lot more thrust. The Me-410 was actually capable of carrying a bigger bomb load than would fit into its internal bomb bay. Another improvement over the Bf-110, the Me-410 was actually capable of carrying weapons internally, which obviously also improved its aerodynamics. A whole host of other changes were incorporated into the geometry of the wings and the slats, none of which I understand, but all of which drastically improved the handling characteristics of the aircraft, which meant it stopped killing its pilots. This made it very popular, unsurprisingly, with Luftwaffe air crews up until now had still been flying the Bf-110, which by the time the Me-410 was actually issued to operational units, 1942 through to 1944, the Bf-110 was hopelessly obsolete and was really only good for attacking shipping and night fighter duties. Now, we have to interrupt this history lesson to bring you our first bit of action in this sim battle. Nachladen has just spotted the Me-410's natural prey, a bomber. It's year 2. He seems to be leaking water, which means his engines are going to be overheating. He's missed him on his first pass. He flips it over, puts it into a dive, levels out underneath the year 2, builds up a lot of speed in the dive, into a shallow climb, He's now on his tail, got himself a nice firing solution. Year 2's defensive gunners are opening up, cockpit view, opens up with his 20 and 30mm cannons. You can see how difficult it is to line up on the target with the joystick. That's part of the skill of flying simulator battles. There he is. Fires a burst into his belly, kills his gunner. He's not down though. There we go. Now there's some nice critical damage. Peels away, he's taken some damage in return. He's got an oil leak, but he's got the kill. And that is what the ME-410 was good for, taking down bombers. And when first introduced into service and used in this role, it was moderately successful, using anything from 20 to 30 to 50mm cannons, rocket tubes mounted under the wings to break up bomber formations. When used against the massed daylight bombing raids of the United States Army Air Force B-17s, it was actually quite successful, at least at first. Because while the ME-410 was a very, very capable bomber killer, while going up against unescorted bombers like the Bf-110 before it, it ran into serious problems if those bombers were escorted by fighter aircraft like the P-51 Mustang. Despite the fact that this was called a heavy fighter, it was really not a fighter aircraft at all, and it was completely outclassed by single-engine interceptors. Once the Mustang was introduced as a long-range bomber escort, and the US Army Air Force daylight B-17 bomber raids were actually capable of being covered by fighters all the way to their targets over Germany, the glory days of the ME-410 were very, very much over. In 1944, when the ME-410 pilots first encountered patrols of Mustangs sweeping the skies clear ahead of the box formations of B-17s, they came in for a very, very nasty surprise, and before long things had gone straight back to the way they were during the Battle of Britain, with the heavy fighters needing fighter escorts, usually Bf-109 G6s and Focke-Wulf 190s of their own, in order to protect them from the escorts of the bombers that they were attacking. Meanwhile, back to the sim battle, you can see there is some ground fire going up against somebody over there, and Nachladen, and there's some return fire coming in from an aircraft that's doing a strafing run. Nachladen's getting stuck in as well. He's giving it full throttle despite the fact that the Year 2 damaged both of his engines. The one on the left is leaking oil, the one on the right is leaking coolant. His ground attack was unsuccessful. He's going into a climb, and you'll see the gun turrets there opening up. These were actually remote controlled gun turrets. I'm going to talk about those for a minute. The Soviets in particular were very interested in this whole remote controlled gun turret concept, and the Soviet Air Force Research Institute made some studies into particularly the gun turrets on the ME-410, because the ME-410, even though it was a heavy fighter, was a very, very similar configuration to Soviet medium and dive bombers like the PE-2, and obviously with such a small and narrow airframe you couldn't fit a whole lot of crew inside, so the capacity for having defensive gunners was quite limited. The Soviets were very, very keen on the idea of adapting these remote-controlled gun turrets in their own aircraft, and so the ME-410 came under a lot of study, particularly from the Russians. Unfortunately for Red Army aviation, the Luftwaffe weren't accommodating enough to actually use the ME-410 on the Eastern Front, and so the Russians were unable to get their hands on any examples for testing until after the war. But when they did, they were very impressed with what they saw. The Russian team responsible for testing the gun turret, lead engineer Colonel V.Y. Magon and the pilot Major I.P. Piskunov, both confirmed that the FD-SL B-131 gun turret operated reliably and easily. The People's Commissariat of the Aviation Industry was so impressed with the design that it was actually incorporated into the DEU turret for the UBK machine gun on the PE-2 Peshka I and the PE-2 Peshka M Soviet dive bombers. Meanwhile, back to the battle, old Nachladen here is definitely getting his money's worth out of his defensive gun turrets. His aircraft is damaged. Both of his engines, one's leaking fuel, one's leaking coolant. There's a hard limit to how long you can keep this thing in the air before the engine seize up. Unfortunately, while trying to land, you can see his airstrip there, he's picked up an escort. There are at least 2 fighters on his tail. He can't land while he's being strafed by 2 enemy fighters, so he's circling the airbase using his defensive gun turrets and the airfields and the aircraft guns to try to get these guys off his back and clear the airspace so he can put this thing down and repair it. So what does he have actually going for him here? Well, aside from the defensive firepower provided by the airfield's anti-aircraft guns, he also has two very, very powerful engines. Even though they're damaged, he can't really afford to run them at full throttle. His aircraft is capable of generating 1730 horsepower of thrust, and he's not weighed down by the massive bomb load that the ME-410 was capable of carrying. This is the night fighter variant. He's equipped with cannons only, no rockets, no bombs. So as long as he doesn't put this thing through any violent maneuvers, this thing is capable of achieving 600 kilometers per hour. It is a very, very fast aircraft in a straight line. So as long as he can just keep out of effective firing range of the guys on his tail, keep circling, and praying that the airfields and the aircraft guns do the job for him, he's actually in with a chance here. You can see the flak lighting up the airspace behind him. If you can't see the dot that indicates where that enemy fighter is, just follow the flak, and that tells you more or less exactly what the guy's position is, as the airfield's anti-aircraft guns light this guy up good and proper. He's just bringing it round in nice, slow, wide circles, careful not to bleed off too much airspeed. In a situation like this, you need to be keeping an eye on the combat messages. The flak doesn't need to shoot that guy down. Nachladen's ME-410, alright, his engines are damaged, he's not really able to push the throttle as far as he would like to be able to push the throttle, but his airframe and his control surfaces are still 100% intact. If the flak does any critical damage to the enemy fighter on his tail that interferes with its handling, then he's got a chance to bring this thing around and start actually trying to turn the tables on the guy on his 6. He's getting close, guns are opening up again. There are a huge number of different ME-410 variants available to fly in War Thunder, purely and simply because of the modular weapons bay meant that there was a massive range of different armament configurations that this thing could be fitted out with. As mentioned at the start of the video, when you include external pylons on the wings for rockets and extra bombs, as well as the internal bomb bay and the huge array of air-to-air weapons that could be fitted to this aircraft, there were up to 140 different weapon configurations that could be fitted to this airframe. Now, just going back to the battle for a second, up there in the top left corner of the screen you can see one of the I-16s on his tail, who's just peeled off, trying to avoid flak. This has given Nachladen the opening that he needs to try to turn the tables on him. Puts the thing into a climb, loops over. He's looking for his target. Again, if you can't see where he is, just watch for the flak. Brings it round. And there he is. Do you see him? Passing in front. He's not going to get much of a shot. Fires a burst. Looks like he shot most of his tail off. He's definitely critted him. There he goes. The flak's still opening up on him. Is he going down? I'll be very surprised if that thing will... Yep, there we go. He's down. He's got him. He just impacted down in the woods down there. That was a really, really good shooting. So, a kill. Good stuff. But he's not out of the woods yet. There is still one other enemy fighter on his tail, desperately trying to shoot him down. But then something else enters the equation. Nachladen is not the only guy attempting to land at this airfield. There is another friendly fighter, possibly out of ammunition, in fact almost certainly out of ammunition, judging by the fact that he's not trying to dogfight with this other I-16. But the other I-16 has now latched onto the tail of the returning fighter aircraft, which gives Nachladen the opening that he needs to turn the tables on this guy as well. So, I mean, technically it's 2-on-1 now, even if only one of them actually has any weaponry. There he goes. He's definitely focused on this other fighter. You can see the other fighter there just looping down low, desperately trying to shake this I-16. The I-16 is leaking coolant. You can clearly see the smoke trail. Nachladen cuts his throttle. Oh, look at this. Oh, you are in so much trouble now. There he goes. Did he hit? I'm not sure. Yeah, he scored a hit. Definitely scored a hit. Looks like his 30 mils have just run dry. He's down to the 20 mils now, but still 20mm cannons. Yes, definitely. There he goes. Again, shot most of his tail off. He's in a power dive. There's no way he's pulling out of that. Another kill. It's now safe for him, finally, to land and get his weapons rearmed. And what a choice of weapons. This thing, as well as the two remote-controlled gun turrets, rearward facing on both sides of the fuselage, each housing a 13mm MG131. The internal front-facing weapons bay could house various different combinations of weapons, ranging from 7.92mm MG17 machine guns, MG151 cannons, MK108 30mm cannons, even the BK5 50mm cannon, which is one of the most popular configurations of the ME410 in War Thunder. Everybody loves the derp gun. It was actually developed from the 50mm gun mounted on the Panzer III tank. It was capable of carrying 21 rounds of ammunition, all the way up to 210mm rockets in rotary tube launch configurations mounted on the wings, which were tested but didn't have very good results, primarily used to break up bomber formations. Or it could carry two 1100-pound bombs in the internal bomb bay and fit external racks for another two 1100-pound bombs on the wings, as well as a pair of external packs housing MG151 or MK108 or MK103 cannons. The amount of weapons that could be fitted to this aircraft was just mind-boggling. The 50mm cannon in particular, which is immensely popular in War Thunder for obvious reasons, and in theory was the best way of taking down an enemy bomber when used in the ME410, and the German engineers had come up with a way of making it effective by using a combination gun sight, which had a 4-power telescope and a collimator gun sight combined, which made it possible to deliver precision fire from a range of 1,000 meters and more, where the 50mm high explosive fragmentation ammunition could easily destroy Pechelikov, Ilyushin, Boston, B-17 and other aircraft. In theory, a German pilot could shoot down enemy aircraft while staying completely out of defensive fire range, although hitting a modern bomber from 800 to 1,000 meters was, well, it took a special pilot in order to pull off that kind of shot. But in theory, it was possible. The whole problem with the ME410 was that the whole concept of the heavy fighter was seriously flawed. If the fighter aircraft that you're sending up against the enemy bombers is so vulnerable that it has to be escorted by fighters of its own, then surely that means that there's a redundant aircraft in the equation there somewhere. Wouldn't it be better to scrub around the whole concept of sending up a fighter that has to be escorted by other fighters and just send up the fighters that don't have to be escorted? Surely that makes more sense and is less wasteful of resources, and that is in fact what eventually happened. The high watermark of the ME410's success as a heavy fighter was on the 11th of April 1944, when a bunch of ME410s intercepted a B-17 daylight bomber raid and shot down 10 B-17s without a single loss. Deciding to push their luck, they landed, rearmed and went up again for another sortie, only this time they were intercepted by P-51 Mustangs. 8 ME410s and 3 BF-110s were shot down, with a loss of 16 crewmen killed and 3 wounded. Production of the ME410 never continued after September 1944. The factories that were producing them, which produced over 1,100 in the 2-year period during which these things were being built, the Messerschmitt factory at Augsburg and the Dornier factory at München, stopped production in September 1944, and production switched over to the Bf-109 G6. Germany just didn't have enough resources or trained pilots to continue wasting them on fighter aircraft that had to be escorted by other fighter aircraft, when fighter aircraft like the Focke-Wulf 190 and the Bf-109 G6 were entirely capable of shooting down B-17s themselves and didn't have to be escorted against Mustangs while they were doing it. Meanwhile, back to our simulator battle here, and Nachladen, there is only one enemy pilot left flying on the enemy team in this mission. There were a lot of bots in this mission. You know what it's like, you queue up for War Thunder late at night. The matchmaker takes its time getting you into a game, and it has to make up the numbers with some AI pilots, but And of course, you know, the simulator battle community will understand what I'm talking about, because there's so few people playing simulator battles that it can take time to actually get into a game. And when you do, it comes as no surprise that half of your team and half of the enemy team the numbers have been made up by AI. That's just what it's like flying simulator battles in War Thunder. Of course, when you're flying something as ungainly as the ME410, even an AI pilot in something like an I-16 can be a significant threat. He has managed to kill 2 of them. He's nailed a Year 2 flown by another player. But that's pretty much exactly what the ME410 is for, taking down bombers. The guy who's left flying on the enemy team in this simulator battle is in a Lend-Lease Spitfire, which is exactly the kind of aircraft, along with a P-51 Mustang, that chewed up the ME410 on a regular basis in real life. And if the guy's flying a Spitfire in a simulator battle, there's a very, very good chance he actually knows what he's doing. So, like it or not, at some point Nachladen is going to have to mix it up with a Spitfire. First, of course, he's going to have to find him. So, what can we do? Well, keep an eye open for the flak. If you can see flak, there's a fairly good chance that there's something happening over there that you should probably be paying attention to. And sure enough, there is one Focke-Wulf 190 left remaining on Nachladen's team, and he is heavily defensively engaged with this Spitfire on his tail, which means that the Spitfire is not paying any attention to what's coming from behind him. The Focke-Wulf 190 goes into a climb. Look at this target opportunity. You couldn't ask for better. The Spitfire follows him up, still shooting at him and giving the best possible shot for Nachladen's guns. The Spitfire, too late, realises the trouble he's in, tries to brake. He's critically hit. He's hit the Focke-Wulf. The Focke-Wulf is going down. He is burning. But now Nachladen is at the top of his climb. The Spitfire, out of energy, was in no position to do anything other than go into a dive to try to get some speed back. Nachladen has the energy advantage and the height advantage. Spitfire's staying on the Focke-Wulf, trying to ensure a kill. The Focke-Wulf is hit. He's burning, he's spinning out of control. Spitfire, unable to manoeuvre as hard as he'd like because Nachladen's first burst knocked out his control surfaces on his wing. He's never going to outrun a diving ME410. Nachladen puts another burst into him. That one misses. But no, he's done it. The Spitfire's in the trees. He's not pulling up. He is out of here. And that was the last remaining fighter on the enemy team. His second player kill and his 4th air kill in total in a simulator battle in the ME410 in War Thunder. Hell, I've never managed more than 3 kills in a realistic battle. The best I've ever done in a simulator battle was managing to take off and land without killing myself. It's really good to see somebody doing this well in a very, very difficult game mode. So that was the ME410, and Nachladen just sitting, flying around, dodging the flak, waiting for the ticker counter to run down, and winning the game. As always, folks, take care, watch your 6, have fun playing whatever you're playing, and I'll catch you next time.